I don't know how else to say this except to say that I feel like I have been set up. And the reason I say that is because I am following all these incredible voices, these incredible singers, this incredible spoken word poetry, and I can only carry a tune in the shower, and my wife would probably argue with me about that one. So I am not going to sing to you. I am going to do something else, and I hope that it will capture your attention as much as all of the previous program. I want to thank the Reverend. I want to thank everyone here at the church for making this possible, and all of you for coming out. It is an honor to be here. It is also an honor always for me when I'm asked to speak really anywhere and at any time, but particularly at this time of year during the celebration of Black History Month because, well, there are a number of reasons, but among them, and key among them, is the fact that I am not actually black, which may not surprise you, but then again, one really never knows. And so not being black, being a white man aspiring to be an ally in the struggle against racism and institutional white supremacy, when such a person is asked to come and speak, particularly at this time of the year, it must be, at least I hope, because someone somewhere has decided that I have something unique to offer to this particular type of an event. And so we'll see if that's true. And I want to also tell you that I realize going into any kind of talk about race at any time of year and in any venue, that I know that this is not the topic that people generally want to discuss. I know nobody really likes to talk about the issue of race and racism for different reasons. People of color don't want to talk about it, particularly with white folks around, because they understand that there is a better than decent likelihood that when they do so, there will be white folks in the room who will dismiss, who will minimize, who will accuse them of exaggerating the problem or playing a race card or whatever terminology it is that we like to use so as not to deal with the issue. And so people of color know that often it's best to just shut down as opposed to getting into that space where they may be minimized or even retaliated against. And by the same token, those of us who are white, we don't like to have the conversation with people of color around, also because of fear, but a different fear. And this is what the research says. This isn't just me telling you what I think. The research says that white folks don't like to engage the topic of race with people of color around because we are deathly afraid that we are going to say the wrong thing, that we are going to say something that will be perceived as racist. Oh my God, if I open my mouth, they might think that I'm racist. Okay, news flash for the white folk in the room. People of color already think there's a pretty decent chance that we are. So you don't need to worry about opening your mouth because the perception is already there. So can we just move through that, you see, because there's an interesting third body of research that tells us, ironically, that it is the very process of shutting down. It is the very moment when those of us who are white do not talk about race, even though it is the elephant in the room. It is that very moment when we refuse to engage the subject that folks of color then start to think maybe the reason we aren't talking about it is because we have something to hide. That's the irony, you see. So the silence only confirms the preconceived notion we would be better off to just have the conversation, make the mistake, and then fix the mistake, move on, and try to do better next time. But instead, we shut down for very different reasons, and we do it even though right now we're at a point in our history, and I mean this now as a country, where we, in all likelihood, need to be having this discussion more than ever for a lot of reasons, and people don't understand that all the time. They think, now how could it be more necessary now to talk about racism than it was, say, 40 and 50 years ago? Well, there are a lot of reasons that I could give you, but perhaps the most important of them is this, and this is beyond the moral and practical and the ethical concerns that I'll try to address this evening. It is a practical matter, you see, because within 25 to 30 years, it is a simple fact, it is not arguable, it is not contestable, it is not up for discussion or debate. Within 25 to 30 years, half of this country will be people of color and half will be white. That is a fact, and it doesn't matter whether folks like it or not. I know there are some folks that don't like it. I know there are some white people in Arizona who are very particularly upset about it. But what I also know about white folks in Arizona, because I was there just a few months ago, is that the average age of white folks in Arizona is about 137. So what this means is that with a little patience and some decent grassroots organizing, we will in all likelihood outlast them. They will lose. And please, I am in church. Do not misunderstand. I am not advocating the death of old white people in the state of Arizona, least of all in a church. I am not advocating their demise. I am simply saying everyone dies. And some people die sooner than others. And age is highly correlated, as we say, with that particular condition of being. So the reality is that whether there are some folk in the white community who wish to avoid the coming of that new day, the rest of us, if we are prepared to embrace it and make something of it, can indeed outlast them. But now that is a very open question. The mere fact that they will pass on into that good night, so to speak, does not guarantee the coming of real multiracial democracy, does not guarantee the coming of justice. Only we, by our actions, can do that. And in order to do that, we will have to have this conversation. And yet at this very moment, we're being told that we needn't have it. We're being told for a number of reasons that we needn't have it. We're being told, for instance, that if we talk about race and racism, especially the legacy of white supremacy institutionally throughout the generations, throughout the decades, throughout the centuries, that is tantamount to getting stuck in the past. That's what nice, very concerned and caring white folks will tell people of color when they talk about the issue of racism. Oh, now, you can't get stuck in the past. You talk about all that stuff that happened a really long time ago, you're going to get stuck in the past. You have to come into the present and look toward the future. This is precious. Coming from conservative white folk who actually love the past so much that they tell us they want to go back to it. When you have taken as your political touchstone in the current moment something called the Tea Party, which is a pretty old reference, you are in no position to lecture anyone about the past, you see. When you come to political rallies wearing powdered wigs, carrying muskets, and calling yourself the Tea Party wearing tri-cornered hats, you are in no position to lecture anyone about sticking to the present and not getting stuck in the past, you see. So I thank the Tea Party for getting rid of that argument forever. But really, they love the past. Folks love the past as long as it makes us feel good. Right? That's what July 4th is. That breaking away from the British thing, that didn't happen last Wednesday. That was a very long time ago. And yet we talk about it every 4th of July. We set off fireworks, we eat hot dogs and apple pie and do all of that patriotic stuff because we love the past when it makes us feel good. We just don't want to deal with the ugly. And you don't get to deal with one and not the other because it's all part of your history. So we have to talk about it. But of course, people tell you, no, we don't. In fact, it's very interesting. You know, I get angry emails. That will surprise you, I'm sure. That will come as a huge, huge shock to you. And sometimes they're angry, and sometimes they're just sarcastic. And among the sarcastic ones, you know, people will write to me, and they'll come up to me after speeches, and they'll say things, and they don't know they sound like a jerk, but they maybe they don't even mean to, but they do. And this is what they say. They say, Tim, you know, this whole race hustle that you've got, because, you know, that's it. It's a hustle. It's a hustle. This race hustle that you have going on, it's so 2007. That's what they say. Right? They say, because this thing happened, maybe you didn't hear about it, Tim. Maybe you missed it, but this thing happened in 2008, you know, maybe you didn't know that a black guy won the presidency, so now you need to find a new hustle because it's obvious that you can't have a problem with racism, and you certainly can't have a problem with white privilege and have a black man in the White House. How could you, they say, have racism and white privilege and still have a man of color as president of the United States? I don't know. Let's think about it for a second. If I were to suggest to you that women and girls have fully equal opportunity in Pakistan, and that sexism and patriarchy have been forever smashed in Pakistan, and this I know because Benazir Bhutto, a woman, was elected not once but twice in that country. She has since been assassinated, so that lets us know just how some folks felt about her. But if I were to tell you, if I were to tell the women in this room, if I were to tell my own daughters, ages 8 and 10, that you know what you really ought to do is pack your bags and move to Karachi, because there You will have fully equal opportunity. Or perhaps India or Israel or Great Britain or the Philippines, all of them have had female heads of state, because if the standard for determining whether a society is fair and equitable and just is that a member of a marginalized group cannot possibly become the head of state, then in all of those places we would have to conclude that sexism had been eradicated. And even my 8-year-old daughter would tell me, no, Daddy. But that's the argument, you know. Just because a president of color is in the White House suggests to us that we need not have this conversation. What's interesting, though, is it's not just folks on the right who don't want to have this conversation. If it were, this would be a whole lot easier, because we could isolate them and the rest of us could have the conversation, right? But the fact is, there are a lot of folks who consider themselves quite progressive, who consider themselves quite liberal, whatever that's supposed to mean, who consider themselves on the left of the political spectrum, and they don't want to talk about it either. Now, for different reasons, perhaps, but regardless of the motivation for one's silence, the outcome of that silence is the same, you see. The President of the United States does not want to have this conversation. I know his reasons for not wanting it are different than many others. But again, regardless of his motivations, political though they may be, for not engaging this topic at a high level, understand the consequence, the outcome, the effect of his and our silence is the same regardless of the motivation. And we know that he doesn't want to talk about it. We know this because the very first time that most of us became aware or familiar with Barack Obama was in 2004, when he was at the Democratic National Convention in Boston. He was a state senator in Illinois at the time, running for U.S. Senate, a position that he would win, of course, that November. So he wasn't known to a lot of people, but he got up and he gave that talk. And it put him on the national stage, and you'll recall it was, like so many of his speeches, an incredible piece of oratory, but there was one line in particular that stood out in terms of the reaction that it got both from the press and from the people in the convention hall. It was that line where he said, and he said it with all sincerity to a crowd that wanted desperately to hear it. He said, "We are not a white America and a black America and a Latino America and an Asian America. We are the United States of America." And everybody just went all noodly. You know? They just, oh my God. Oh my God. So beautiful. Right? The applause went on forever. Like 30 minutes in, it was late. I had 2 small children. I was old. I was tired. I'm like, I got to go to bed. I woke up the next morning, turned on the Today Show, and they are still clapping for that one line. I'm exaggerating, but not by much. It was a huge applause break. Right? And I remember sitting there thinking in that moment, what does it say about our country? What does it say about our culture? That a man as intelligent as that, because, you know, even people that don't like him politically will usually give him credit for at least being bright. Now, I know Donald Trump doesn't think so. Donald Trump, you know, is not sure that Barack Obama actually earned his way into the Ivy League schools, from which he graduated magna cum laude, which they don't just give out for fun. You have to earn that. But Donald Trump thinks that Barack Obama didn't deserve to be in those schools. Donald Trump, a man who got $10 million from his daddy to start his first business, has the temerity to question whether somebody else earned what they have. Donald Trump, who in 2008 endorsed McCain and Palin, one of whom graduated 5th from the bottom of the Naval Academy and only got in because his daddy was an admiral, and the other of whom went to 6 colleges in 5 years, damn near didn't graduate from any of them. He has the temerity to question the academic credentials of that man, but that is a different speech for a different evening. Back to the point. Most people, Donald Trump accepted, will acknowledge that the man is at least intelligent, regardless of what you may think of him politically. And yet in that moment, as I was watching him, hearing that line, going to bed, thinking about that line, waking up and hearing it over and over on the morning news and the evening news, over and over again, I kept thinking, what does it say that a man that intelligent looked at all of us and felt that he had no option but to lie to us? Because he had to know it was a lie. That very summer, a study had just been released from MIT and from the University of Chicago, which found what? That job applicants with quote-unquote white-sounding names were 50%